I'd like to explore two aspects of the fateful encounter of Yaakov and Esav that dominates the first part of the Parsha. So we are doing Parshas VaYishlach, of course, I'm sure you know that, and we are starting, near the beginning. The Parsha picks up from the end of last week's Torah reading, in which Yaakov has made his way back from Padan Aram, from Mesopotamia, heading back to the land of Canaan, to his homeland, to the promised land, to his parents' home. And Hashem has instructed him the time has come to return, but nevertheless, he is fearful. He's fearful because he is aware that he's going to approach the territory of his brother Esav, who had previously expressed his intention to kill him when the opportunity arose, in particular when their father died. Now, at the very end of last week's parsha, and that is relevant for our discussion tonight, as we'll see, Yaakov sets out on his way. Yaakov halach ledarko v'yifga'u bo malachei Elohim, and he confronted angels of God. Vayomer Yaakov kasher ra'am, when he saw them, he said, Machana Elohim zeh, this is the camp of God. Vayikra shem hamakom hu Machanaim, and he called it Machanaim. Now, what's notable here is that he calls it Machanaim in the plural, like two camps. Machaneh would be in the singular. Machanaim is two camps. Why are there two camps? And who are these Malachei Elohim? Who are these godly angels? Not exactly clear. But in any case, Rashi seems to take it at face value that they were angels, because Rashi says that in our Parasha, VaYishlach Yaakov Malachim, the angels that he sent, the word Malach also means a messenger, as in a human emissary, which would be the simple understanding, meaning that these were emissaries or representatives that Yaakov sent, but Rashi says no, these are real malachim, these are angels, and probably Rashi is basing himself on the proximity to the parsha that preceded about the angels. So I'm kind of elaborating on that for reasons that will become clear as we go along. So Yaakov should be full of confidence. After all, God had promised him years ago, I'll be with you, I'll accompany you, I will be by your side, I will bring you back ultimately to the land, to this land, so don't fear. But Yaakov is cautious and he is fearful, and he's fearful to the point that he feels that he needs to prepare himself for the worst. For the worst meaning the confrontation, perhaps possibly violent, possibly bloody, possibly even a mortal conflict with Esav, who is approaching him with 400 men, 400 ruffians. Okay, so that is all by way of background. Take a look, please, at verses 8 and 9. If you're using the Stone Chumash, it's on page 172, the top of page 172. Verses 8 and 9, Ches and Tes. Vayira Yaakov ma'od, Yaakov is very afraid. Vayetzer lo, and he's distressed. Vayachatz es ha'am asher ito, and he divides the people who are with him, including the flock, the herd, and the camels, into two camps. Vayomer, and he said, Im yavo Esav al hamachaneh ha'achas v'hikahu, if Esav comes and he against one of the camps and he strikes them, meaning he kills them or he captures them or he scatters them, he injures them, the other camp at least will escape. So this is one of the three strategies that he adapted. I'm sure you know, Rashi says he prepared himself for military tactics. He prepared himself with a charm offensive by sending wave after wave of a tribute to Esav, and he prepared himself with prayer. Now, the thing is here, the military a tactic would seem to be firstly highly simplistic. Okay, we can't expect the Torah to elaborate completely on the military approach. It just alludes to it, but it's a bit simplistic where it would seem to be simplistic in that he says, Hamachana Isha Lifleta means like with certainty. Vahaya Hamachana Isha Lifleta. It doesn't say V'yihiya and it will be, which is a kind of prayer or a hope. Vahaya, it's as if he's saying with certainty, the second camp will definitely survive. Well, how does he know? So, meaning maybe it won't work, maybe the title won't work. And even though you could say, yes, he's dividing into two camps. So if Esav goes after one, the other one will escape, which seems to be what he's saying, which, okay, there may be some logic, but of course, Esav could divide his attack force into two as well, 200 and 200 potentially. Moreover, Rashi says, Ki alachembo, I will fight with him. Now, again, Alshikh doesn't say this, but I think he's hinting to the fact that Rashi's approach, which I'm sure can be, let's say, justified or buttressed, has a weakness, because how can he be so certain dividing his camp into two? So if Esav attacks one half of the camp, Esav may very well prevail. And then Esav can go after the other half of the camp and prevail there as well. If you are confronting a formidable force, then surely you want to amass all of your weapons and all of your personnel in order to wage battle. If you divide your camp in half, then how can you be confident of success? Okay, you could say it'll be a surprise attack. All of those possibilities exist, but the word lifleta, to escape, suggests that actually there's no, the second camp is not going to go to battle, but it's going to flee. Okay, fair enough. But what about, is he going to divide his children in one camp and him in another camp? He's going to put his wives or some of the wives with one and some with another camp. Which camp will Yaakov himself be in? If Yaakov is prepared to accept casualties in one camp, maybe he'll be among the casualties. I mean, the camp that escapes may only be a certain proportion of his family. So if you look closely at it, one can ask these questions. So our friend for the year, the Alshikh, has a different approach, a very beautiful approach. And he asks, he says the following. He says that Yaakov was assured that he will be protected, God will be with him. And yet he is afraid. And many of the Mefarshim observe that Yaakov should not have been afraid. And maybe that's why he was upset or he was distressed at the fact that he was afraid. That could well be. In other words, he felt that his anxiety, his uncertainty, his insecurity was itself wrong, meaning if he was on a higher level of bitachon, he would not have even had those insecurities. But he does have the insecurities. So the Alshikh says as follows, that Yaakov was concerned, of course, the main possibility, which he does not discount, the main possibility, which Rashi says, is Shema Yigrom Hachet. Yes, he was promised, but maybe he has squandered the blessing. Maybe he is unworthy of the assurance. The assurance that God gave him perhaps was on the condition that he remains righteous. And in his great humility, he was not super confident in his own righteousness. That could very well be, and Alshikh accepts that possibility. He adds something further, that maybe the assurance, and this is philosophically subtle but important, maybe the promise of God was he won't catch typhoid, he won't succumb to some other pernicious illness, he won't get the ancestor to COVID-19, he won't fall down a cliff, and he won't be set upon by a bear or something like that, meaning he won't come to harm through natural forces, natural causes. But maybe Hashem will not intervene against the exercise of the free will of his brother. And that possibility, Alshikh says, has to always be considered, because Hashem does not prevent a Baal Bechira from exercising his free will. A Baal Bechira means someone who is in possession of free will, that is a human being. God will not inhibit that person from the exercise of his free will. So maybe Hashem assured him that insofar as natural mishaps and harm is concerned, I'll protect you from those possibilities. But God will not necessarily prevent another human being from exercising his free will. And Yaakov was concerned about that. However, Yaakov had another insight, and this is the suggestion of Alshikh, which I find quite compelling. Yaakov knows that Esav is obsessed with Olam Hazeh, this world. That's why when we first meet the two of them, other than in their infancy and in the womb, when we first meet them as people, as teenagers, according to our tradition, Yaakov is preparing food, and Esav is prepared to sell his birthright for the food. He says, give me this red stuff. I want it now. Hazeh, now. Yaakov is the one who chooses Olam Haba. Esav is the one who chooses Olam Hazeh, this world. So Yaakov knows that the main reason that Esav hates Yaakov is because Yaakov stole the blessings. But what are the blessings? The blessings are it's all of those blessings that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov, thinking that he was Esav, are blessings of material success and prosperity, of prominence, of power, of wealth, of success in this world. So therefore, Yaakov thought the best way to ensure his survival in this potentially lethal conflict with Esav is to divide his camp. But he doesn't divide it, Rachel and Leah here, the maidservants here, and their children and their children. He doesn't divide it that way. He divides it like it says in verse, in Pasuk Ches. He divides it, the people in one camp and all the cattle and the livestock and the flock and the camels, and presumably the other wealth that he had goes into the other camp, because Yaakov knew that Esav was primarily interested in the money. He was primarily interested in the chattels. In other words, if Yaakov, and of course as part of his charm offensive to send all of that to Esav, which was only probably a small part of Yaakov's wealth, but Yaakov figured that if Esav initially encounters all of his wealth, he'll seize that, and the other camp will go free, because Esav is not that concerned really, even though he said, I'll kill my brother Yaakov, but of course he said, I'll kill my brother Yaakov when our father dies. And Yaakov was aware that his parents were still living. So although he was afraid, he felt that he had a pretty good chance of survival, because Esav is not that likely to try to kill Yaakov in the lifetime of Yitzchak. And therefore, by allowing him to seize and to plunder his property, Yaakov thought that this actually would be a pretty reliable a tactic, and that's the military tactic that he fell back upon. And that's why he says that the other camp with all the people will all survive, because Esav will plunder the wealth, and that's all he's really interested in. Of course, Yaakov himself, he chooses Olam Haba, the next world. So although I'm sure the wealth was something that he recognized as useful, valuable, part of the divine blessing, nevertheless, it wasn't the primary objective of Yaakov in his lifetime. His interest was in Olam Haba, the next world. But he knew Esav is all about this world. Besides which, he was concerned that Esav, he was aware, Alshikh also says this, that another reason why Yaakov was concerned, was worried, which again requires an explanation, because Hashem assured him he'll be safe. So why was he so worried? And again, that's the whole drama in the first part of this parsha. Another reason why he was worried is that he knew that Yaakov, had been delinquent in two important mitzvot. One mitzvah is kibbud av ve'em. He had not been honoring his parents the last 20 years and more, which Esav had been. And secondly, Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov had left the land of Israel, and Esav was living in the land of Israel. So Yaakov thought, actually, I have been delinquent. I have relinquished two important mitzvahs, and Esav on the other side of the ledger has been fulfilling those mitzvahs. But by the same token, he knew that Esav is unlikely to kill Yaakov because Esav does care about Kibud Av. And he even said from the start, I'll kill Yaakov when my father dies, but the father is still alive. The old man keeps living, even though they thought years ago he's, breathing his last. Yitzchak also thought, that's why he gave the blessing so long before. But he was outliving the expectations. So as long as Yitzchak is still alive, Yaakov thinks that actually Esav is not very likely to kill me, but he may do everything else that he can do to harm me. And Yaakov said, Zozain. So I think this is quite a practical and very compelling explanation, which I was pleased to find. But now I want to tell you about another aspect, which again is beautiful and quite creative and profound as well. We know that between this passage, meaning Yaakov's concern, his fear, his prayer to Hashem, and the actual encounter with Esav, there is something else which I'm sure all of the learned people who come to this year are familiar with. And of course, I mean, Vayavek ish imo. So Alshikh starts, as he generally does, with a few quite compelling questions. If you take a look at Pasuk Chaf Beis, verse 24, which you can find on page 22, rather. Pasuk Chaf Beis 22 on page 174. So Yaakov dispatched the mincha, the tribute, all of those animals, livestock, wave after wave, which he dispatched as a tribute al panav. He sent it ahead. And he spent the night in the camp. Asked the Alshikh a question which I'm sure you, like me, have read this pasuk, this verse many, many times. He asked two very good questions. Firstly, you've got more than two, but on this pasuk he has two. Firstly, what's the connection between the two statements? The verse seems to be like a non sequitur. He dispatched the mincha, the tribute, before him, which is the subject of the previous few verses. And the second half of the verse says, "V'hu lan b'machane hahu b'layla hahu v'hu lan b'lalu b'machane." And he spent the night in the camp. What do the two have to do with one another? The other question he asks about this verse is, what is it? What relevance is it? What is it adding? What value does it add to say he slept in the camp? Well, where else is he going to sleep? The Holiday Inn, the Hilton, Marriott points on air miles. Where is he going to sleep? Of course, he'll sleep by Machaneh. What is the Torah telling us notable, the fact he's sleeping in the Machaneh? But then he asks a much better question, a much more obvious question, which probably you have thought of, even I thought of it. How is it that this assailant attacked Yaakov, V'yavek ishimo, whether he was an angel of Esav, which we will look into that, explore that possibility, which is, as very well known. But whoever he was, even if he was just a mugger, what about the beginning, the end of last week's Parasha? Yaakov encountered angels of God, and he said, this is again, what's the pasuk? We said he called it Machanaim. Yifguvo malachim, malachei Elohim, he met angels of God, and he said, Machan Elohim, this is an encampment of God. If that's where he's sleeping, where is the protection? What's the whole point of these malachim, of these angels? If this is Machan Elohim, then Yaakov should feel reassured, and even if, for the reason that we said before, he still has some anxiety. Okay, fair enough. But Lamaaseh, in point of fact, how is it that Yaakov was assaulted if he's in the Machaneh? And it says clearly, "V'hu lan b'laylahu b'machaneh." So how was he assaulted? What about all that protection? Moreover, later on, when the Torah narrates the wrestling match, so Yaakov says, give me a bracha. I won't let you go till you bless me. What blessing did he want? And why did Yaakov ask his assailant, what's your name? What's your name? He said, I won't give you my name. So those are the questions. He asked a few others as well, but that's enough to get us started and hopefully to pique your curiosity. So he says something, I think, brilliant. Machanaim, in the plural. Yaakov was accompanied by angels. That Hashem sent angels to escort Yaakov. And it's very possible that his whole time in Haran, he was, so to speak, benefiting from the protection of the angels. Even though he does come to, some misfortune with the switching of the wives and other things, but nevertheless, he doesn't come to harm. He prospers very much. He has one son after another. Okay, Rachel was childless, and then she did give birth. And certainly on the journey, on the way back, it's reasonable to think that Yaakov was accompanied by these heavenly angels. Why, therefore, does the Torah say that angels of God encountered him? Says Alshikh, they are, Yaakov and his entourage are on the border of the land of Israel. They are coming from Chutz La'aretz to the land of Israel. Says Alshikh, v'yifgeuvo malachei Elokim, angels of God from the land of Israel went out to greet him. And of course, he also says, as many others do, that when he dreamt in the beginning of last week's Parasha, when he dreamt of the ladder, angels of God ascending and descending, so many of the Mefarshim say, that the Medrash says as well, the angels of the land of Israel were going up the ladder, and the angels of the diaspora were coming down the ladder to escort him further on his journey, now that he's coming back. So the angels from the land of Israel go out to greet him. That's why it calls it Machanayim. There are two camps here, because he still has his angels from Chutz La'aretz, because he still is in the other side of the river. He's not yet in the land of Israel, but the Malachei Eretz Israel go to greet him. So that's great. That's why he said, this is amazing. I feel very honored, and this is the encampment of God, the Malachim of Eretz Israel. Okay, that's great. However, so he says that, and furthermore, although Yaakov sent the waves of tribute, the charm offensive to Esav, he did not rely on that. It's the nature of a tzaddik. He doesn't put his primary confidence or primary emphasis on the naturalistic efforts which he does, although he must do them, but ultimately he realizes his success and his protection comes from Hashem. So therefore, Hulan bam, keep losing those words, and he was wanted to stay in the camp because he put his faith in the camp, in the protection of those angels. The problem is, why does the next pasuk say, he got up in the night, it says, he went to bed. Then he got up in the night, he woke up, I guess, his whole family, and he took the women and the maid servants and his children, and he took them across the Ma'avar Yabok. Why? What's the rush? Why do it at night? Why not in the morning? Says Alshikh, which again, that's a question which is quite striking. I mean, it jumps off the page. Why is he doing this at night? It says V'hulan, he's in B'machaneh. Machaneh is in Chutz La'aretz. He says very logically, he says, Yaakov began to think, wait a minute, what am I doing? These Malachei Elokim, these angels of God, angels of the land of Israel who've come to greet me, I'm settling down for the night on the other side of the border of the land of Israel. Is it right for me to do that? Maybe the angels are going to get impatient and say, look, we are angels of the land of Israel. We've gone beyond of our natural home in order to greet you. But now you're settling down for the night. Maybe we won't stay. That Yaakov thought maybe they won't stay for me. And even if they do, because they want to honor me, but is it right for me to, so to speak, inconvenience the angels of God who don't really belong in Chutz La'aretz to stay with me the whole night just because I've decided to spend the night? And therefore Yaakov thought they may leave. And therefore he decided, actually, I need to go into Eretz Israel. So therefore he went into Eretz Israel, and he brought all of his family across the Ma'avar Yabok, like crossing the fjord, I suppose it was. The problem is that he went back for Pachim Ketanim. Now, Alshikh just mentions that, the Gemara says in Chulin, he doesn't elaborate, but according to our tradition, he went back, having brought all his family and household across the river. He went back because he forgot something. And now, although he initially was going to sleep in the camp, but he moved the camp for the benefit of those angels, and I guess for his benefit as well, for the protection of the angels. But then he went back and he was vulnerable because he was in Chutz La'aretz, and it was at night. And night is the time, besides of danger generally, but night especially is the time, in the spiritual sense, of the ascendance of the forces of wickedness, the forces of temptation, and the, so to speak, harmful malachim and spirits are active at night. So he says that this is when he was assaulted by this Vayavek Imo Ish. However, he says that Yaakov was not sure who was this Ish. It was evident to him and even to the reader. I looked around, all the Mefarshim, as far as I can see, agree that this was not just a person, not just a mugger, he was an angel. Yaakov was not sure, though, whether he was a good angel or a bad angel, whether he was Saro Shel Esav, which is the view that Rashi mentions. But I discovered, I should have known it earlier, but I discovered, Alshikh quotes it, the Medrash has two different views. There's an opinion that this was Michael. He was, so to speak, a guardian angel, but maybe he was coming to challenge Yaakov or to, represent the forces that contend within every person. We can speculate what was the role of this assailant if it was Michael. But Yaakov himself, according to Alshikh, was not sure who he was, whether he was Michael or whether he was Samael, the angel of the Sar, the angel of Esav. When he injured he dislocated his thigh, so he says, which other Mefarshim say as well, that this angel of Esav was seeking some basis to harm Yaakov. The only transgression of which Yaakov was guilty was marrying two sisters, and this Kaf Yerecho, his hip or his thigh, really, is a euphemism for the male organ, and that's the successful injury that successful from the point of view of the Sar Shel Esav. And they struggled through the night, but ultimately Yaakov prevailed over him, and he said, "Shalcheni ki Allah hashachar." Now, again, Rashi says Allah hashachar, that I'm an angel, I need to sing praise because it's nearly dawn. But of course, according to Rashi, that this is Saro Shel Esav, why is he singing praise? According to Alshikh, when the angel said, "Let me go," because it's almost dawn, so Yaakov thought, maybe he is Michael, one of the guardian angels, and he is going to sing praise of Hashem. Or maybe he's Saro Shel Esav, which, as we know, is the dominant theory, so to speak. He is the guardian angel of Esav. So why does he need to go? Because it's dawn. Says Alshikh, Esav is dominant at night. The angel of Esav can prevail, or can, let's say, assail Yaakov at night, but once it's the morning symbolizes the clarity, the awareness of the presence of Hashem in a person's life. A person is susceptible to the blandishments, to the enticements of the Yetzer Hara at night, symbolically, when he's not the clarity of understanding of the awareness of the presence of Hashem has become attenuated. And of course, certain Averas are more readily committed at night in any case. So therefore, at night, the angel of Esav felt, I have a chance to overcome Yaakov, but by the time the morning arrives, I've got no chance. Besides which, he says to Yaakov, if you defeat me in the day, there's no great accomplishment in that. So, when the daytime arrives, I'm giving up the ghost. If you excuse the mix my metaphors, I've got to go. I surrender. You've got to let me go, because there's no point in continuing this wrestling match once the morning arrives. Then he says, but Yaakov is uncertain. Maybe he is a holy angel, and he wants to say Kadosh, 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 because it's the dawn. So Yaakov says, I won't let you go, kim berachtani, unless you give me a bracha. So Alshikh says, as Rashi also says, berachtani, until you acknowledge that the blessings that I received from our father were deserved. That's why he says that berachtani. He doesn't say ki'im tivarcheni, unless you bless me, but berachtani is like acknowledge the blessing that I already received. So from the grammar, Alshikh shows how berachtani hints to acknowledging the blessing that I have already received, and that's assuming that he is Saro Shel Esav. Of course, if he's Saro, if he's Michael, then he can get a bracha, because an angel of God can bestow a bracha, can be a conduit for bracha from Hashem. But Yaakov at this point is thinking he's more likely Saro Shel Esav, and I want you to acknowledge the validity, the validity of my claim for those blessings. But he didn't really give him that blessing. He just said, well, we won't call you Yaakov anymore, we'll call you Yisrael. And so he doesn't explicitly give him the bracha, nor does he agree to Yaakov's plaint to tell me your name. Yaakov wants to know, who are you? What does your name means? Are you Sarah Shel Esav, or are you a holy angel? Which he also does not really tell him. He said, why do you ask? And the explanation I would like to suggest, Alshikh doesn't quite say this, is the Yetzer Hara keeps us guessing all the time. He won't say outright, of course I'm Sarah Shel Esav, that's why I want to harm you, to kill you, to defeat you. He doesn't tell us that. He is too coy for that. He keeps us guessing. Yaakov prevails over Esav, and the Jewish people prevail over the forces that seek to destroy us. And the individual Jew has the capacity, the ability to also triumph over his own Yetzer Hara, but you never win the battle outright. The temptation and the challenge continues throughout one's life and throughout the history of the Jewish people. Lama zeti shalishmi, why do you ask my name? He doesn't really give him his name. He says, you'll always be guessing a certain urge, a certain temptation. Is it something worthy? Maybe it is, or maybe it's not. It requires careful careful scrutiny, analysis, self-knowledge, and self-awareness in order to recognize what is the voice of the Esav within every person. And I think that this is ultimately part of the meaning of this wrestling match. So just to summarize, as we like to do, Yaakov divided his camp as a military tactic. It was a military tactic that was customized for the weakness of Esav, because Esav is obsessed with Olam Hazeh. He only wants the wealth of this world. So Yaakov thought, my chances of escape are quite good. If I divide my camp, Esav will seize the camp to plunder it, and I will be able to escape. I and my family will escape. Ultimately, it's Olam Haba that interests me more than Olam Hazeh. Plus, he knows that Esav is still concerned with Kibud Av. He's not that likely to kill him in the lifetime of his father Yitzchak. And then we saw, I think, a beautiful, profound analysis of friend or foe. Who are you? And Yaakov doesn't really know for certain, but he's kind of, by the end, he's quite convinced it is Saro Shel Esav, and ultimately Yaakov prevails over him, but not eternally, not permanently, but rather prevails over him on this time, on this occasion, but Esav will live to fight another day, according to the symbolic interpretation that we've given it, representing the forces of evil and the Yetzer Hara within every person. Thank you very much.